Forget everything you thought you knew about the Mafia. The Godfather stereotypes, distinguished gentlemen in elegant suits, dark-windowed cars, and dramatic restaurant shootouts, are nothing more than a carefully crafted smokescreen. The true Mafia doesn't flaunt its presence. It whispers in ministers' offices. It doesn't pose with luxury sports cars. It owns entire ports. Envision a corporation where blood ties, not shares, dictate power, where intelligence reports, not financial statements, form its ledger, and where continental control, not mere profit, is the ultimate goal. This shadowy entity has thrived for a century and a half, its headquarters nestled deep in the mountains of southern Italy, in a village where a statue of the Madonna stands for every resident. Its name is the Ndrangheta, and if you've never heard of it, that's precisely how they prefer it, a testament to their unparalleled effectiveness. Duisburg, in western Germany. On August 15, 2007, at 2:24 in the morning, this quiet industrial city, often subtly described as boring by tourist guides, abruptly transformed into the epicenter of an international scandal involving two European powers. 6 young Italian men exited the Da Bruno restaurant where they had been celebrating a birthday. The youngest was 16 years old, the oldest 18. It was an 18th birthday celebration. They piled into their cars, 4 in a sedan, 2 in a minibus. 4 minutes later, 2 killers appeared. At least 7 to 10 shots were fired into their bodies, followed by a reload, then 6 execution shots to the head. It was methodical, professional, and silent. German media dubbed the incident the Duisburg massacre, the most brutal Italian mafia killing outside of Italy. By morning, Berlin had dispatched a request to the Italian Interior Minister for investigative assistance. The scandal was monumental. For Italian investigators, however, one specific detail unlocked the entire case: a charred figurine of Archangel Michael found in the pocket of one of the slain young men. This was no coincidence, no mere superstition. It was a signal, a code. Archangel Michael serves as the patron saint of the Ndrangheta, the Calabrian Mafia, an organization whose existence was largely unknown outside of Italy. Even before German police could grasp the motives, Italian Carabinieri knew with certainty it was revenge. A blood feud, ignited in the tiny village of San Luca in the Aspromonte Mountains, had extended its reach into the heart of Europe, maintaining all the archaic brutality of the Calabrian code of honor. Those 6 bodies in Duisburg became a definitive turning point. For the first time, Europe saw that the Mafia was not merely Sicilian folklore, but a global network where ancient laws of blood were executed on modern European streets with the same ruthlessness as in the Calabrian mountains of the 19th century. Yet, to comprehend Duisburg, one must begin at the genesis, the moment an organization emerged in the mountains of Calabria that a century and a half later would become the most potent mafia on the planet. Roots of stone and blood. The 1860s. Calabria, the toe of Italy's boot, was one of the poorest regions not only in Italy but across all of Europe. The Aspromonte Mountains featured rocky slopes and sparse villages where time seemed to have stood still in the Middle Ages. Following the unification of Italy, the new state faced immense challenges in establishing authority in this wild land. The feudal system, which persisted until the mid-19th century, left behind a power vacuum, swiftly filled by local power groups. The name Ndrangheta derives from the ancient Greek word andragathia, meaning valor or courage. In antiquity, Calabria was part of Magna Graecia, and Greek influence was palpable here, well into the late Middle Ages. However, the valor espoused by the Ndrangheta's founders had little to do with chivalric ideals. It was the valor of survival, the valor of blood, and the valor of silence. The first documented evidence of structured mafia-style criminal activity in Calabria dates back to the 1880s, when the Palmi court conducted the first major trial against an organized criminal group with 248 defendants. Even then, it was clear, this was no ordinary gang. It was a complex hierarchical structure with its own laws, rituals, and a management system more akin to a military organization or a religious order than a typical criminal group. In testimonies from 1929, during the trial against the Mafia network in the village of San Luca, the key prosecution witness was a former member of the organization who, for the first time, described the Ndrangheta's internal structure in meticulous detail. What he revealed astonished the judges. It was a true parallel government with its own constitution, judicial system, taxation, and even diplomacy. The legend of the three knights. At the core of Ndrangheta ideology lies the myth of three knight brothers, Oso, Mastroso, and Carcagnoso. According to legend, these noble Spanish knights avenged their sister's dishonor by killing her aggressor. For this, they were imprisoned for 29 years, 11 months, and 29 days. During their incarceration, the brothers developed the Code of Omerta, the foundation of all mafia laws. Upon their release, each brother established his own organization. Oso, under the protection of St. George, founded the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. Mastroso, under the protection of the Virgin Mary, laid the groundwork for the Neapolitan Camorra, and Carcagnoso, under the protection of Archangel Michael, traveled to Calabria and founded the Ndrangheta. Oso is the skeleton, Mastroso is the head, and Carcagnoso is the body, and these three parts form a unique creation, states the Mafia legend. Despite the evident mythological nature of this story, it reveals the Ndrangheta's fundamental principles, the cult of honor, the paramount importance of blood ties, and the sacred character of the organization. Every Ndrangheta member knows this legend by heart, passing it down through generations as sacred scripture. Sanctuary of power. The Ndrangheta's mother base is considered to be the village of San Luca, nestled in the heart of the Aspromonte. Yet, the true sacred center of the organization lies higher in the mountains, the sanctuary of Our Lady of Polsi. Here, nearly 900 meters above sea level, amidst wild rocks and dense forests, hides a place more sacred than the Vatican for Ndrangheta members. The sanctuary of Our Lady of Polsi is more than just a church. It is a place of power where the most crucial Ndrangheta rites are performed, initiations into higher ranks, trials for traitors, and the forging of alliances between clans. The statue of the Madonna with the baby Jesus, known as the Madonna della Montagna or Madonna della Polsi, has become a symbol of protection and patronage for the Calabrian mafiosi. Annually, on the 1st and 2nd of September, thousands of pilgrims ascend to the sanctuary on foot, trekking dozens of kilometers along mountain paths. Officially, this is a religious pilgrimage, but Italian investigators have long known that beneath the veil of religious processions, the most important Ndrangheta boss meetings take place. Deals worth millions of euros are struck here, operations are planned, and people's fates are decided. The journey to the sanctuary is a genuine test. The mountain trails are perilous, the weather unpredictable, and wild animals are a common sight. It is believed that those who successfully reach the sanctuary on foot can ask the Madonna for the fulfillment of any wish. For Ndrangheta members, this path serves as the first trial, distinguishing determination from recklessness. Blood as foundation. The core of the Ndrangheta is not territory or even money. Its foundation is blood. The organization's fundamental unit is called the Ndrina, based exclusively on kinship. The family boss, or capo bastone, is not an appointed position, but an inherited title, passed from father to the eldest son. Brothers, nephews, cousins, sons-in-law, all bound by blood or marriage, rally around him. These very blood ties render the Ndrangheta virtually invulnerable to external infiltration. Inserting an agent into a family clan is nearly impossible. Here, everyone knows everyone's genealogy back 7 generations. Betrayal within the Ndrangheta is not merely a betrayal of the organization, it is a betrayal of one's own blood, one's own family. This is why there are so few pentiti, those who cooperate with law enforcement, among Calabrian mafiosi. The tragic story of Maria Concetta Cacciola exemplifies how blood discipline operates within the Ndrangheta. When this woman decided to testify against her husband and his clan, relatives forced her to drink muriatic acid. This was not an act of sadism, but cold calculation. A death by illness appears more natural than murder and avoids attracting police attention. The message to other potential traitors was unequivocally clear. Blood is more important than life. Ritual as law, the Ndrangheta is more than just a criminal organization. It is a religious military order with its own theology and liturgy. The initiation ritual takes place outdoors, strictly at night, under the light of the moon and stars. The location is chosen symbolically, usually a high ground or a sacred site linked to the clan's history. The ceremony begins with the pronouncement of an oath, in the name of Garibaldi, Mazzini, and La Marmora, echoing the names of Italian Risorgimento heroes. This is not by chance. The Ndrangheta positions itself as the heir to national liberation fighters, as protectors of the Calabrian people from external oppressors. The new member receives a small saint's image, Santina, depicting the Madonna or Archangel Michael. The capo then cuts one of his fingers with a knife, and a drop of blood falls onto the Santina. The figurine is then burned, and its ashes scattered to the wind, symbolizing that the oath is written not on paper, but in the soul. The master of ceremonies utters the final words, "A bullet for you." This is not a mere threat, but a statement of fact. Whoever breaks the oath will be killed by their own comrades. Unlike other mafia organizations where initiation occurs only once, in the Ndrangheta, the ritual is repeated with every advancement in rank. Each new degree demands a new oath, a new drop of blood, a renewed commitment. Even newborns, children of Ndrangheta members, undergo their first anchoring to the lineage and organization before they even learn to speak. The knife is shown to them, and traditional formulas are whispered, laying the groundwork for future loyalty. The cult knows no age, only blood. Power structure. For a considerable time, Italian intelligence services viewed the Ndrangheta as a federation of independent family clans, a horizontal network without a single command center. This illusion was carefully cultivated disinformation. Only in 2010 did Operation Crimine Infinito reveal the organization's true structure, a strictly hierarchical pyramid with a single command center. At the apex of the pyramid sits the Provincia, or Santa, the supreme governing body of the entire Ndrangheta. It is led by the Capo Criminale, the criminal boss, and his right-hand man, the Mastro di Giornata. Following them are the so-called colonels, the Mastro Generale, Capo Società, and Contabili. Each is responsible for specific aspects of the organization's activities. The second tier consists of 3 mandamenti, districts, Tirrenico, northern coast, Ionico, eastern coast, and Centrale, inland areas centered around Reggio Calabria. These cluster the locale, territorial entities, each controlling a specific area or city. The base unit comprises 3 ndrine, which together form a locale. Each locale has its local head, capo locale, an accountant, ragioniere, and a capo criminale, responsible for enforcement operations. These leaders must represent different ndrine, ensuring a balance of interests and preventing power concentration in the hands of a few. The number of members in an ndrina rarely falls below 50 people but can reach several hundred. Each ndrina is divided into Grande Società and Piccola Società, the higher and lower levels of initiation. Novices begin as Picciotto Liceo, simple young men, and after 6 months they can be promoted to Picciotto Scaro, marked young men, subsequently advancing through a complex hierarchical ladder. Any attempt at autonomy or disobedience is punished immediately and brutally. Discipline within the Ndrangheta is not merely an organizational principle, it is a religion. Orders from the Santa are executed without question, regardless of distance or circumstance, whether in Calabria, Lombardy, or Duisburg. This rigid hierarchy and centralized command, while maintaining blood ties at the grassroots level, have given the Ndrangheta colossal advantages over its rivals. Cosa Nostra, which lost its unity after the arrests of the 90s, and the Camorra, torn apart by internal wars, could not withstand the Calabrian expansion. By the early 21st century, the Ndrangheta had become not only Italy's wealthiest mafia, but also one of the world's most influential criminal organizations. Shadows in suits and ties. The modern Ndrangheta is not a band of mountain brigands in cloaks wielding shotguns. It is a multinational corporation in suits and ties, with offices in skyscrapers and accounts in Swiss banks. The sons of old bosses study at Europe's and America's top universities, earning degrees in law, economics, and engineering. They speak multiple languages, understand international law, and grasp the intricacies of offshore business. Yet, beneath the elegant attire and university diplomas, the same blood flows that course through the veins of their grandfathers in the Aspromonte Mountains. The story, which began in Calabria's stone villages a century and a half ago, continues in Milan's business centers, Antwerp's ports, and Toronto's skyscrapers. Archangel Michael, whose images were found in the pockets of those killed in Duisburg, protects not only Calabrian shepherds, but also international cocaine traffickers. The Madonna of Polsi blesses not only pilgrims ascending to the mountain sanctuary, but also drug containers passing through the port of Gioia Tauro en route to Rotterdam and Hamburg. How did a mountain cult transform into a global empire controlling 80% of European cocaine? How did ancient blood laws adapt to the realities of the digital age? And why were 6 bodies in a quiet German town just the tip of an iceberg, beneath which lies an entire continent steeped in Calabrian blood and money? Port of Gioia Tauro, Europe's gateway. Amidst the vast olive groves and vineyards of Calabria, where the scent of citrus gardens mingles with the sea breeze, lies the port of Gioia Tauro, a pivotal node in the Ndrangheta's global logistics network. Not long ago, this port was considered semi-archaic, few berths, old cranes, infrequent containers. Today, however, ultra-modern ships from Colombia, Brazil, and Panama dock here, offloading hundreds of tons of cocaine that then disseminate across Europe. Over the past 10 years, cargo traffic volumes have surged by more than 5-fold. From the inside, everything appears to be a normal cargo operation: terminals, logisticians, customs officers, charter managers. But closer inspection reveals suspiciously silent sailors from Latin American countries working in the warehouses and porters who are young men from Albanian villages. They are replaced at night, and hidden surveillance cameras, configured for automatic facial recognition, are ubiquitous around the port's perimeter. The central office of an anonymous logistics company registered in a tax haven is located in Milan, while actual control is exercised by the Capo dei Mari, the boss of the seas, one of the most respected colonels in the Santa's structure. The Ndrangheta's annual income, according to OCCRP estimates, stands at approximately $60 billion, equivalent to about 3% of Italy's GDP. For comparison, this exceeds the budget of many European states. In 2020, Interpol announced an international operation involving over 10 countries to dismantle the Ndrangheta. By January 2021, 355 alleged group members were arrested. But these arrests merely uncovered the tip of the iceberg. For every individual apprehended, dozens of replacements stand ready to continue the work. Control of the port is ensured by the Reggio Calabria locale, but a key role is played by the Mandamento, where the interests of 3 Ndrine intersect: Nirta, Acerbi, and Bianco. Each Ndrina contributes its share. One handles offloading, another manages cargo concealment, and the third oversees container delivery to hidden warehouses. Coordination is handled by the contabile, whose surname discreetly appears on the shareholder lists of a local shipbuilding company. Among Italian ports, Gioia Tauro surpassed Antwerp in cocaine volumes by the early 2000s. Antwerp and Rotterdam have become Europe's lungs for the Ndrangheta, distribution hubs where contraband flows seamlessly through the European Customs Union. Barrels of olive oil, packages of tomato paste, crates of citrus fruits, all serve as elite codes for white powder. In Lombardy and Liguria, certificates of origin are falsified, and Ndrina chemists adapt recipes. Cocaine with 90 to 95% purity is sent to London and Paris, while 75 to 80% purity mixtures remain for local traffickers. The system operates simply and effectively. Cocaine containers are disguised as fruit or industrial products. Documents are drafted through shell companies in Panama or Belize. Each batch has a false bottom. If customs discovers the first layer of drugs, the main cargo remains untouched. Corrupt port workers unload containers at night when shifts change. By morning, the clean containers are already en route to Milan, Turin, or across the Alps to Germany and France. Prosecutors have tried to combat the Ndrangheta for decades, but found that disrupting supplies was impossible without international cooperation. Operation Nebrodi, conducted from 2006 to 2008, involved 7 countries and yielded only partial successes. Approximately 120 suspects arrested and 15 tons of cocaine seized. However, the network quickly revived, with new Ndrangheta and roots appearing in Spain, Portugal, and Germany. Happiness offices, the legal facade of the shadow empire. In Milan, London, and Montreal operate happiness offices, a network of law firms, restaurants, fitness centers, and real estate agencies. Officially, they are never connected, but all founders are close relatives of a capo mondo from the Troiano Ndrangheta. These happiness offices serve as the primary tool for money laundering. Millions of euros in cash flow in, falsified incomes are registered, and then the sums are transferred to tax havens, used to purchase shares in tech startups and acquire foreign real estate. Unlike other criminal groups, the Ndrangheta, in expanding its borders, has meticulously recreated its structure everywhere, forming a dense network that encompasses both commercial and political organizations, comparable to a method of colonization. The Ndrangheta's structure is quite unique. It consists of hundreds of clans, each formed on the basis of kinship and typically connected to other clans by the same blood ties, making it virtually impossible to become a mafia member without being part of one of its families. Casinos in Serbia and Slovakia, purchased with black cash, hold a special place. For operational purity, real chips are not used for winnings, but rather duplicate accounts on electronic wallets with cryptocurrency. In one such casino, up to 200,000 euros per hour were withdrawn via Bitcoin exchangers. The Contabile, with illicit connections in Zurich and Liechtenstein banks where accounts are registered under shell companies, monitors fund movements. The MAFIA acts as a predator, targeting relatively young companies in specific sectors, those where money laundering is easiest, trade, financial services, or where the share of public contracts is relatively high, construction, public utilities. Initially, infiltration in the form of embedding mafiosi in management or as co-owners leads to a sharp increase in company revenues, which, however, is explained by a surge in the legalization of illicit mafia proceeds. The surge in revenues is a one-time event, gradually leveling off in subsequent years, contrasting sharply with the relatively smoother dynamics of healthy companies. Nevertheless, revenue growth in mafia-captured companies does not lead to an improvement in their financial situation. Conversely, leverage increases in such companies due to growing debt and decreasing equity. The rise in leverage is consistent with the hypothesis that the mafia's corporate strategy is driven by short-term interests. The reduction in company equity may signal a desire to extract assets in the legal economy for cash out. Illegal energy, the green facade of the new economy. Calabria is renowned for its wind farms and solar arrays, lauded by European environmentalists. But behind the facade of renewable energy hides a new Ndrangheta scheme. By overestimating costs, fictitious contractors and subsidiaries controlled by the Ndrangheta obtain EU subsidies, siphoning tens of millions of euros from the regional budget. Under the control of the Pretola Ndrangheta, whose members were involved in power plant construction, over 125 million euros in subsidies were embezzled between 2018 and 2022. This scheme warrants a separate chapter. Energy has become the new oil for the Ndrangheta. Companies on mountain slopes are registered under dummy engineers, loans are granted by a friendly bank, and government inspections accept work without scrutiny. When, in 2023, one of the companies was halted for environmental violations, it was discovered that no workers on site had been regularly employed. Furthermore, conformity certificates for solar panels had been purchased in Germany, where the manufacturer was unaware of their criminal use. Waste and ecology. The dark humor of economics. Waste is another gold mine. Calabrian and Ndrangheta control industrial and urban waste disposal. The scheme is simple. For public contracts, they take 100% of the payment, for proper recycling, 20%. And the remaining 80% is either illegally burned in abandoned landfills, buried in protected areas, or dumped into the sea. The appearance of radioactive elements in the region's rivers is not a side effect, but a consequence of this creative approach to ecology. In one investigation in 2019, journalists found a sunken vessel off the coast of Vibo Valentia containing containers of medical waste and industrial chemicals. Legends spread among coastal fishermen. It's not a spill at sea, it's the Ndrangheta saving the budget from unnecessary costs. But local authorities prefer to remain silent, fearing that an open investigation could end with the invisible hand. The group has managed to almost completely control the region's economic and political life. The Ndrangheta suppressed any local economic initiative that could somehow free the local population from financial dependence, infiltrated its supporters and members into state positions, and terrorized the local populace in every conceivable way. With those who dared to resist, the mafiosi were not subtle. They left dead puppies, dolphins, or severed goat heads on doorsteps, smashed office or store windows with hammers, or set cars ablaze. Global network, colonization of continents. By the late 2010s, the Ndrangheta had solidified its presence in Canada, Australia, and Western Europe. Its affiliated councils operate in Toronto, Melbourne, London, and Hamburg. The difference from Cosa Nostra's immigrant networks in the United States lies in the strong connection to Calabria. Any appointment or even major conspiracies pass through the San Luca Santa. According to estimates by Transcrime, the Italian Research Center on Transnational Crime, less than 1/4 of the Ndrangheta's proceeds originate from its home region, whereas for Cosa Nostra, the famous Sicilian mafia, over 60% does. This demonstrates that the Calabrian mafia has truly become global, unlike its Sicilian counterparts. In Canada, a local Ndrangheta purchased a luxurious villa near Lake Ontario, where they host wedding receptions for organization members. During these weddings, plans for expansion into Central and South America are discussed, and financial flows are managed through local investment funds. In Australia, Ndrangheta gangs have merged with motorcycle clubs, becoming their grey area. There, they operate on the same principles. Blood and ritual are more important than weapons. The names Sicilian bandits have been replaced by wolves of Aspromonte, but the core principles remain. The network of agents includes former intelligence officers, lawyers, and financiers. Some of them clean up their work in suits and ties, presenting themselves as experts in combating organized crime, while at night they prepare strategic documents for the Santa. Digital evolution, when technology serves crime. The modern Ndrangheta is not just mountains and sanctuaries. It involves encrypted messengers like Sky ECC and EncroChat, used by hundreds of bosses and their couriers before the major arrests of 2021. Even the FBI's ANOM trap, designed to intercept criminal messages, only caught secondary players. The top echelon of the criminale never trusted standard gadgets. Today, the Ndrangheta stands as one of the wealthiest international organizations. Its annual income totals 53 billion euros, and it controls approximately 80% of all drug trafficking in the European Union. The more complex the conditions under which they operate, the greater their achievements. Calabrian clans keep law enforcement agencies in over 30 countries worldwide on high alert. Cryptocurrencies are a convenient tool for cross-border payments. Bitcoin for large cocaine shipments, Ether for investments in shadow startups, Monero for internal payments where anonymity is critical. Decentralized exchanges allow cryptocurrencies to be traded without the involvement of banks and regulators. Even the most dedicated anti-money laundering fighters admit tracing the chain of Ndrangheta transactions is possible, but proving their link to a crime is extremely difficult. Clan warfare, a chronicle of cruelty. While Cosa Nostra lost its unity after the Maxi trial of 1986 to 1992, the Ndrangheta strengthened through its wars of 1970 to 1991. The First War, 1974 to 1977, resulted in approximately 200 victims. The Second, 1985 to 1991, claimed up to 700 lives. This was a period of unprecedented violence, shootouts in olive groves, murders in churches, explosions in public places. In 1991, during Carnival in Palmi, going out with fireworks meant blocking the path of rivals. 2 dead and dozens injured were the result of a street battle between San Luca and the De Stefano clan. This was followed by massacres in Reggio Calabria, and then painful chains of revenge where each killing demanded a new death. 1993 marked the climax, 4 murders in 1 hour in the city's main square, and only then did a fragile truce emerge. In the town of San Luca, several family clans have long been warring. Paolo Nirta was one of the bosses of the Nirta Strangio clan. This mafia group had been engaged in a fierce struggle with the rival Pelle Votari clan for nearly 10 years. The conflict escalated when, following bloody shootouts on Christmas Day in 2006, the wife of boss Giovanni Luca Nirta was killed. 3 other people, including a 5-year-old child, were also wounded. But revenge is not a forgotten tradition. It is a tool of political pressure. In 2006 and 2007, bloody gifts at Christmas, attacks on bosses' homes, and child murders were reactions to arrests and Operation Parma. And in August 2007, the Duisburg massacre became the culmination of a long war. The captured Paolo Nirta is the brother of Giovanni Luca Nirta, who was arrested after the murder in the German city of Duisburg. And the father of the 2 brothers, Giuseppe, the clan head, was jailed in May following successful police operations against the Ndrangheta. Paolo Nirta's arrest is also significant for law enforcement because the defendant is also the brother-in-law of another clan boss, Giovanni Strangio. This man has been particularly sought for 1 year, as investigators consider him one of the main perpetrators of the Duisburg massacre. The front extended across the entire European Union, from Spanish ports to French country villas, from FBI traps in the United States to secret bases in West Africa. Conflicts began to take on an international character, drawing Syrian and Egyptian groups into their orbit. Those who lived through these wars remember not dates, but names: Chapo, Scacchiera, Nero Papa. Each carried their own mark, from a nickname to a special type of tattoo, the blood passport. Their deeds and betrayals have become legends passed down within the Ndrangheta in the dead of night, accompanied by whispers and the clinking of blades. Judicial battles, Operation Rinascita. Between 2019 and 2021, Italian prosecutors conducted the largest anti-mafia trial in the country in 3 decades, Operation Rinascita. In a specially constructed bunker in Lamezia Terme, 338 defendants were brought before the court, of whom 207 were sentenced to a total of 2,200 years in prison. The sentences issued concluded a 3-year trial, the result of a large-scale investigation led by prosecutor Nicola Gratteri, a man under police escort since 1989 due to mafia threats. Gratteri stated that the prosecution's main goal was to demonstrate the extent of the Ndrangheta's influence on all economic, administrative, and political aspects of the region's life. This is a very serious verdict, and we are very satisfied with it. We have finally proven that there is a network of officials, entrepreneurs, and politicians who do business with Calabrian clans. Witnesses revealed details to the court such as weapons hidden in cemetery crypts, drugs transported in ambulances, and marijuana cultivated near municipal drinking water reservoirs. The mafiosi would beat, kidnap, or kill particularly stubborn opponents. Code of honor in the 21st century. Today, in the era of mobile communications and the internet, the Ndrangheta preserves the sanctity of its rituals. Yes, digital tools have accelerated communication, but they have not abolished blood and ritual. The transfer of power via video call is impossible. Each candidate must personally undergo the mountain test, offer a sacrifice, utter the words of the ancient incantation, and cross the boundary of secrecy. Omerta has acquired new layers. Silence does not merely mean the absence of talk about business. It is the refusal to use services that could be compromised, not just common phones, but even secret messengers without a personal meeting. Every gathering is accompanied by a purity ritual, a thorough inspection, a renewed sworn promise not to disclose details to anyone. Usury, humanitarian programs. Amidst the global economic crisis, Ndrangheta representatives not only amassed hundreds of billions of euros, but also offered fellow citizens a series of humanitarian programs. The usury scheme was exceedingly simple. The group was inclined to lend money for business development not only at high interest rates, but also in exchange for the business itself. Subsequently, when the debtor had in effect repaid the entire debt, the Ndrangheta sharply increased the interest rate and proposed that the entrepreneur voluntarily relinquish his business. Otherwise, the refuser would face incapacitation or the cemetery. Ultimately, most large factories, construction companies, and corporations in the rich economic north fell under the control of the Calabrians, who originated from one of Italy's poorest regions. It is believed that they control over 1/3 of the country's underground economy, and their incomes amount to tens of billions of euros. The Ndrangheta's family clans own shares in oil refineries and seaports and have even bought up all construction contracts in key regions. Pentity, a crack in the wall of silence. Indeed, the number of pentiti is growing. While there were around 50 in the 2000s, by the 2020s there are over 300. The reasons include long sentences, fear for their families, and weariness from an endless war. Among the pentiti, there is an increase in the number of women and young people, not born in Calabria, but involved in the criminal enterprise. Some of them became key witnesses in the Rinascita Scott trials, where over 300 defendants and 900 witnesses were presented. But the Ndrangheta retaliates. It creates new ranks like abbedessa, abbess, and avocata di cosa, woman of law, through which it intercepts the potential of new pentiti, offering them alternative oaths and special missions. This is not just filtering, it is an attempt to maintain blood ties despite changing realities. International operations, a blow to the global network. The Ndrangheta is not merely an Italian problem, it is a transnational challenge requiring global responses. Operation Eureka, in 2020, with the participation of Europol and American agencies, led to the arrest of approximately 500 people across 10 countries. Archimedes and Lanterna continued the work, targeting financial flows rather than just killers. In 2018, Italian police arrested over 300 individuals as part of an operation against the Ndrangheta Mafia network. Among those detained were the head and several high-ranking members of the group, prominent businessmen, and officials. The arrested were accused of murders, extortion, money laundering, arms trafficking, and drug dealing. In 2023, in Calabria, police conducted a large-scale operation executing arrest warrants for 43 people linked to the Ndrangheta Mafia clan. Among those arrested were several Calabrian politicians. In May of the same year, raids led to the arrest of over 160 people. In 2023, German and other European police forces, in cooperation with Europol, conducted a major special operation against the Italian Ndrangheta Mafia. This demonstrates that fighting the Calabrian Mafia has truly become an international endeavor. The principle is straightforward. A blow to money weakens ties, a blow to ties destroys rituals, and the disruption of rituals undermines the blood contract. Only in this way can what has been assembled for centuries under the veil of sacred rites be dismantled. Economic consequences. Economists at the Bank of Italy conducted a detailed study on the Ndrangheta's influence on the legal economy. They found a strong negative impact of the mafia on long-term employment levels, a municipality shifting from the top 10% with the least mafia penetration to the top 10% with the most leads to a 28 percentage point reduction in employment growth over 40 years. Companies captured by the mafia have an extremely high probability of exiting the market. But in this war, there is no final battle. It is more of a marathon, where each generation of trials and operations merely pushes the fight into a new round. And the Ndrangheta knows how to run for a long time. Its heart, generation after generation, feeds on ancient blood, and its brain constantly updates technological schemes. However, recent reports indicate that the Ndrangheta has lost its absolute hegemony in the European market due to the activation of Balkan criminal groups, although it still maintains a leading position. Italian prosecutors and investigators often lament that their European colleagues underestimate the penetration of the Calabrian mafia into their countries. Pizzo and extortion, taxes of blood. When one speaks of the mafia, pizzo, extortion disguised as protection, is often the first thing that comes to mind. For the Ndrangheta, pizzo has become not only a source of income, but a complex financial operation with elements of a state tax. Small shops, restaurants, and workshops are forced to pay a security tax for the inviolability of goods and businesses. But behind every euro of extortion lies an army of lawyers, accountants, and financial flow experts. Receipts are drafted in such a way that the entrepreneur himself voluntarily signs a contract. In the early 2000s, the Italian National Association of Small Entrepreneurs conducted research. 85% of Calabrian businesses reported a catastrophic increase in security costs and opaque payments to local private forces. The profitability of pizzo was estimated at 3 to 4 billion euros annually, and losses to the regional economy amounted to 12% of GDP. Furthermore, even in the small zones of Ndrangheta influence, pizzo was collected with automated precision, fixed monthly fees, a percentage of turnover, fines for late payment, and bonuses for loyalty. Unlike other criminal groups where the demand for money was personal, you owe me X, the Ndrangheta shifted to an automated collection system, even using SMS for payment deadlines. In this way, pizzo transformed into a multi-billion euro revenue stream that, with regular payments, ensured the uninterrupted functioning of the entire Ndrangheta infrastructure, from operational groups to supply channels. Local entrepreneurs joke that Ndrangheta taxes are more reliable than state taxes. The gun will force you to pay on time, and if the state delays, only paperwork remains. Usury and humanitarian programs. Extortion and usury merged into a single scheme of humanitarian programs. Mafiosi loaned money, enticing businesses with advantageous interest rates, but then imposed senseless fines and penalties, a rate of 5% per month and a 50% penalty for delay. Faced with reluctance to repay, the victim would voluntarily put their assets up for sale. All transactions occurred through happiness offices or law firms that legalized the operations. As a result, companies in northern Italy, valuable real estate, and large port terminals fell under the control of Calabrians, originating from one of Italy's poorest regions. It was precisely this technique that allowed the Ndrangheta to transform acquired commercial activities into a legal instrument for laundering proceeds. The proximity of territorial justice and the corruption of friendly judges allowed transactions to be conducted without lengthy lawsuits and seizures. This scheme initiated what was later called the capture of the state from within, when the mafia manages not only the shadow economy but also key levers of power. Competitive intelligence. Blood analysis. The Ndrangheta has transformed information gathering into a science. Its contabili analyzed regional economic indicators, mayoral election polls, relationships among business elites, and criminal dynamics. With the help of insiders among municipal officials, criminals gained access to tender documents, cost estimates, and urban development plans. Based on this data, they predicted the field of conquest and determined expansion strategies, where to arrive next autumn and where to wait a year or two. Reports were daily, and in the mandamento, options for capturing new market shares, including legal projects, construction of residential complexes, development of green areas, promotion of mountain tourism, were discussed weekly. Each locale maintained its own database on influential people, judges, prosecutors, police, politicians, and entrepreneurs. Photographs, documents on past decisions, connections to other structures, everything was accumulated and systematized. White-collar individuals played a significant role. Lawyers, accountants, and consultants provided access to internal databases, helped formulate official requests, and evaded controls. This was not espionage at the level of passing a note through a passerby, but genuine corporate research with financial models and risk assessments. Police surveillance and wiretapping systems revealed only a small fraction of this network. The Ndrangheta prioritized personal contacts, connections through women and families, service employees, and informants among defecting bandits. Every pentito, by naming names and explaining connections, drew a map of relationships that was then analyzed by special services. Post-pandemic aggravation, new horizons. The COVID-19 pandemic presented the Ndrangheta not only with a challenge, but also an opportunity. When Europe locked down, the Mafia tripled its activities in the delivery and logistics sectors, utilizing its own distribution channels for products and pharmaceuticals. Black raids on warehouses of protective equipment and disinfectants became part of the group's social programs, blood and patronage in one package. On one hand, the mafiosi opened free kitchens for the elderly and needy, swaying public opinion in their favor. On the other hand, the retail and pharmaceutical sectors were brought under control. Warehouse spaces were leased by friendly companies, and contracts for the supply of equipment and medicines were drafted in offshore jurisdictions. Thus, the Ndrangheta strengthened its positions not only in the criminal world, but also in the shadow of the legal economy. Cybercrime, a new front. In recent years, the Ndrangheta has extended its activities into cyberspace. Cyber attacks using ransomware have become a new source of income. Companies paid ransoms in cryptocurrency to restore their data. Victims included competitors of mafia bookmakers and state institutions in southern Italy. Against the backdrop of a universal transition to electronic services, cybercrimes generated tens of millions of euros for the Ndrangheta. To execute complex operations, criminals hired external hacker groups, often from Eastern Europe, while remaining in the shadows themselves. This outsourcing model allowed them to reduce risks and maintain the organization's integrity. Shadow fintech startups, under the guise of innovation. The Ndrangheta invested in fintech startups that offered solutions for micropayments, decentralized lending, and currency exchanges. These were often small companies with a legal background and a clean reputation, but partially managed through trustees. Promising projects initially received 1 to 2 million euros in investment, followed by an influx of tens of millions. Through these startups, the Ndrangheta tested new schemes for transferring and laundering funds, micropayments of 100 to 200 euros without links to personal data, transaction tracking wallets, and black wallets for anonymous operations. Consequently, several companies were acquired entirely under the guise of corporate mergers, and their technological solutions were integrated into the mafia infrastructure. Criminal tourism, the crusade of the code. The Ndrangheta has developed a new type of criminal tourism. In the post-COVID period, cafe clubs, anti-cafes, and co-working spaces became meeting points for bosses, not in the mountains, but closer to civilization. Procurers, laundering agencies, and investment hubs organized training tours for new members, lessons on the code of omerta, masterclasses on financial management, and demonstrations of ancient rituals. Such roundtables were held in neutral locations, from the Swiss Alps to the Portuguese Algarve. But all marketing was strictly confidential. Invitations were sent via encrypted messages, and addresses were specified just 1 hour before the start. Many novices saw the Ndrangheta for the first time, not through legends, but live. Elegant suits, ties, millions of euros on tables, and the dim light of a smoky room. Modern law and the criminal syndicate. The Ndrangheta has thoroughly studied the legislation of 24 countries in which it operates. Special legal units, composed of seasoned lawyers, analyze forthcoming changes in antitrust, tax, and anti-corruption laws. When, in 2024, the European Union debated a directive to tighten control over cryptocurrency exchanges, The Ndrangheta-affiliated European Association for Innovation and Blockchain secured a 2-year postponement of mandatory user identification. During this period, the group implemented its operational schemes across dozens of exchanges throughout Europe, securing a non-interference zone and gaining time to increase its volumes. In Italy, the Ndrangheta possesses a network of prosecution agents, entrepreneurs and officials ready to provide advance warnings about impending raids, furnish copies of operational materials, and even influence judicial decisions. To avoid sensational clean hands operations, clans employ patronage schemes. They appoint loyal candidates to administrative positions who then automatically approve tenders and do not interfere with official judicial proceedings. As a result, local courts in pizzo and extortion cases delivered only suspended sentences, and entrepreneurs preferred to settle on the spot fines through the mediation of the contabile. This allowed the illusion of fighting the mafia to be maintained, while the criminal syndicate strengthened its positions in the legislative and executive branches. Santa and politics, power behind the scenes. The Ndrangheta understood long ago. True power lies not in weapons, but in offices. In Calabria, the Ndrangheta invested in election campaigns, securing a vote bank for specific candidates. The scheme is simple. A fixed sum is paid for each promised vote, and then elected deputies repay the debt through uspe baci, favors, securing state contracts and administrative benefits. Thus, in the 2022 elections, several mayors were discovered in collusion with Ndrangheta networks, but the cases did not reach a conclusion. The deputies obtained immunity. One of the most striking cases involved allegations of ties to the Ndrangheta by senators from various regions. In an interview with Le Monde, one of the deputy ministers admitted, "I prefer to have business relations with the Calabrians rather than with German bureaucrats," which sparked an international scandal and an investigation by the European Public Prosecutor's Office. Pentiti, a crack in the wall of silence. Until recently, the Ndrangheta could boast no more than 50 pentiti. Today, their number exceeds 300. The reasons include long sentences, fear for their families, and weariness from incessant internal wars. The new pentiti are increasingly women and young people, not bound by blood ties to Calabria. The collapse of Omerta is a serious alarm bell for the Santa. One of the most sensational cases is the confession of Vincenzo Caputo, who described the financial management scheme: money laundering through cryptocurrency exchanges in Estonia, fictitious real estate agencies in the United Kingdom, and investments in startups in Israel. His testimonies led to the confiscation of assets worth over 200 million euros. But the Ndrangheta quickly compensated for the losses. New ranks of Abadessa and Avocata di Cosa emerged, promising pentiti protection and alternative oaths. Worldwide operations, a global response. The Ndrangheta is not merely an Italian problem. In 2020, Operation Eureka, with the participation of Europol and the FBI, led to the arrest of over 500 people across 10 countries. Operations Archimedes and Lanterna targeted financial flows, blocking offshore accounts, seizing offshore companies, and confiscating real estate. But Crimine Infinito in 2010 demonstrated the harder the pressure, the more decentralized the organization becomes. Blows to central hubs lead to the disintegration of segments, but new locale quickly fill the liberated niches. In Germany and Australia, intelligence services have established international units to combat the Ndrangheta. In 2023, Europol and German police conducted the largest special operation against the criminal syndicate in Europe. Dozens of key figures were arrested and assets worth 150 million euros were seized. But even here, the mafia was prepared. Within the network of affiliated councils, a process of structural reformatting was already underway, and the peripheral members of the criminale had gone underground, transferring powers to nominees. Economic consequences: the breaking pulse of regions. A study by the Bank of Italy revealed that regions with significant Ndrangheta penetration lose an average of 28 percentage points in employment growth over 40 years. Investments avoid areas where taxes are higher than state tax rates. In the short term, mafia-captured companies show a surge in revenues due to the legalization of illicit funds. But then, the stagnation effect sets in. Losses increase and debts accumulate. Experts call it the chronic mafia disease of the economy. When on the surface, the economy appears to be growing, but under the hood, there's a rusty engine, rotten schemes, and a pizzo soaked in gasoline. It will inevitably spill out at the first turn. Future. Who will win the stage? The Ndrangheta knows how to adapt to the threats of the 21st century, from cyber attacks to pandemics, from economic globalization to stricter laws. But its vulnerability lies in blood. The blood code united it for centuries, but in the era of mobility and migration, the family's gut instinct weakens. The younger generation increasingly asks why, above how. A global response to the Ndrangheta challenge requires not only arrests and trials, but also community restoration, social mobility, economic transparency, and a culture of the rule of law. Without this, blood will merely turn into rust, corroding the organization's structure from within. Then, the mother in San Luca will not withstand the new generations who will choose light over darkness. In Reggio Calabria, in the offices of Europol and the FBI, in courtrooms in Rome and Berlin, they are not just fighting crime. They are fighting for the soul of regions where the mafia has become a state within a state, and only time will tell whether modern law can defeat the ancient code of omertà and replace the culture of blood with the code of justice. Year after year, as the Calabrian Aspromonte Mafia solidified its positions, Italian authorities strived with all their might to demonstrate that the Ndrangheta is not merely a criminal group but a counter-state with its own courts, laws, and taxes. In this segment, we delve into the final link of the Ndrangheta's cycle, how ancient songs of blood have been replaced by legal codes, how corporal punishments have given way to judicial proceedings, and why the endless struggle for justice increasingly transforms into a spectacle where the puppeteers remain in the shadows. Courts against the Santa, Operation Rinascita Scott in Lamezia Terme, became a symbol of the state's resolve. In a specially constructed bunker, where walls were lined with 100-kilowatt concrete teeth, 338 defendants were presented, of whom 207 received sentences totaling 2,200 years in prison. Here, the names of the capo criminal and the mastro di giornata resounded loudly, but behind the mask of the accused lurked only figures, replaced by dozens of new faces. The court showcased the structure: 3 colonels, mastro generale, capo società contabile, 3 mandamenti, and countless locale. During the trial, prosecutor Nicola Gratteri, under escort since 1989, emphasized, "We have proven that the Ndrangheta controls everything, the economy, politics, even the sacraments." But the public never saw the real bosses. They remained in the shadows, sending reckless youngsters to court, whose fate served as an example of taming the wild, but did not undermine the true power of the Santa. Media front, image as a weapon. While the Ndrangheta once hid in the darkness of tunnels and forested ravines, by the mid-2010s it actively utilized the media. Emphatic videos of pilgrimages to the Madonna of Polsi served a dual purpose: to conceal the real meetings of teams under the guise of religious processions, and to convince young people that the code of honor is not a crime but a cultural tradition. Bloggers, allegedly funded by independent funds, published alternative stories about Calabria, where the Ndrangheta is a guarantee of order for the poor. On YouTube, content featuring views of mountain trails and old churches, blurred images of untold riches could be glimpsed: purchased villas, expensive cars, secret warehouses. At the same time, there was no criminality on screen. Only the face of the mafia without blood, with an authentic sense of indigenous patriotism and responsibility for the common people. Advertisements for legal businesses, allegedly working in the name of the family, covered any negative mentions. New wave of lawsuits, Operation Old Bridge, and spin-offs. Despite media efforts, law enforcement agencies did not allow the Ndrangheta to rely on impunity. Rinascita Scott was followed by Operation Old Bridge, 2014, with the participation of the FBI and Italian police, which targeted ties with American unions. Dozens of intermediaries and couriers were arrested, but here too, the group's main leadership remained out of reach. The following years brought a series of spin-offs, local operations targeting individual Ndrangheta, Pollyanna in Canada, Airstrike in Australia, Typhoon in Western Europe. Each resulted in several successful convictions, but represented only a small cleanup compared to the Ndrangheta's global scale. Money laundering through charity and public projects. By the mid-2020s, the Mafia was acquiring new forms of legalization, aid funds for the needy, support programs for the elderly, sponsorships of sports clubs. Charitable actions under the slogan, "The Ndrangheta Helps," involved entire cities, free meals, kindergarten renovations, subsidized holidays for school children. Behind all this lay a single goal: to demonstrate a social mission and gain access to public grants. In Milan and Rome, social support points were opened, registered as non-profit organizations, but funded through happiness offices. These structures were not scrutinized as thoroughly as commercial enterprises, allowing them to conceal the actual volumes of payments for charitable purposes. Infiltration into the judicial system. One of the key directions has been penetration into the notary, prosecution, and judicial corps. The criminal syndicate meticulously analyzes the career plans of future judges, offering help to their relatives. As a result, in some instances of the Court of Cassation, decisions appeared that revised sentences for extortion and money laundering. Prosecutors sometimes receive anonymous signals about the inviolability of targets and refuse to conduct investigations to maintain public order. This method of chilling through legal uncertainty allows the Ndrangheta to gain time and create obstacles for prosecutors and police. Shadow alliances with other criminal networks. In the 21st century, the Ndrangheta's rigid verticality integrated with horizontal alliances, with Colombian cartels, Albanian syndicates, Balkan gangs, even the Japanese Yakuza. Non-aggression agreements and division of spheres of influence are concluded with both written and oral contracts. Joint operations, transporting cocaine and methamphetamines through West Africa and the Middle East, increased revenues by 15% in 2 years. Tactical alliances allow the Ndrangheta to utilize other channels while remaining invisible. Fall of Omerta, women and white collars. Traditionally, the Ndrangheta was considered an all-male club where women were relegated to the role of homemakers and educators of future mafiosi. But reality proved more complex. Women in the Ndrangheta have always played a key role, only this role remained invisible to the outside world. Sisters of Omerta. This is what women who have attained a special status in the organization are called. They participate in strategic decisions, manage finances, and conduct negotiations with politicians and businessmen. When men are in prison or hiding from justice, women take the reins of the clan. They transmit orders to prisoners, coordinate the actions of different Ndrine, and manage legal businesses through which money is laundered. But the price of this power is high. Maria Concetta Cacciola of the Bellocco clan decided to testify against her husband and his family. The revenge was terrible. Relatives forced her to drink muriatic acid. Officially, she died of illness. The message to other potential traitors was unequivocally clear: blood is more important than life. Yet, in recent years, the number of female pentiti has been growing. While there were few in the 2000s, by 2025, they represent almost 30% of all pentiti members of the Ndrangheta. The reasons are varied: weariness of violence, desire to protect their children, fear for their own lives. Many are mothers who do not want their children to repeat their father's path. Their testimonies are particularly valuable. Women know financial schemes, political connections, and the organization's inner workings. It is thanks to female pentity that law enforcement has succeeded in unraveling money laundering schemes through charitable foundations and kindergartens. Technologies versus traditions, the battle in cyberspace. The Ndrangheta long resisted digitalization, believing that traditional communication methods, personal meetings, notes passed through trusted individuals, were more reliable than any technology. But reality forced adaptation. In the early 2020s, the organization adopted encrypted messengers Sky, ECC, and EncroChat, which presented themselves as WhatsApp for criminals. When law enforcement breached these platforms in 2021, millions of messages were intercepted. Hundreds of Ndrangheta members worldwide were arrested. But the most important bosses remained beyond reach. They never trusted mass-market solutions. The Capo Criminale and his closest entourage used their own communication systems developed by specially hired IT specialists. Some of these systems operated on a blockchain basis, rendering them virtually untraceable. In parallel, the Ndrangheta began to engage in cybercrime. Ransomware attacks became a new source of income. Companies paid a ransom in cryptocurrency to restore access to their data. Victims included banks, hospitals, and government institutions. To conduct the attacks, the Ndrangheta hired hacker groups from Eastern Europe, thus remaining in the shadows. This outsourcing model allowed them to minimize risks and maintain anonymity. Economic footprint. How the Mafia kills regions. A Bank of Italy study from 2022 provided figures that shocked even the most seasoned economists. Municipalities with a high level of Ndrangheta penetration lose an average of 28 percentage points in employment growth over 40 years. This is not an abstract statistic. These are the fates of millions of people deprived of normal work, prospects, and a future. The mechanism of destruction is simple and effective. First, the Mafia captures a company through corruption, intimidation, or direct violence. In the first few years, the company's revenues grow sharply, thanks to the legalization of criminal money. But this is an illusion of growth. In reality, the company becomes a money laundering tool. Its actual economic activity diminishes. Debts increase, financial leverage grows, and equity decreases. After a few years, most of these companies either fail or definitively turn into empty shells. But the primary damage is not in individual companies, but in the systematic weakening of the regional economy. Investors do not go where the Mafia controls business. Young talent leaves. Only those who have no choice remain, and they swell the ranks of the Mafia. The vicious cycle closes. In 2004, proceeds from rigged public contracts in Calabria amounted to over 4.7 billion euros, 18.6% of all wealth produced in the region. This means that almost 1 in every 5 euros earned in Calabria passed through the hands of the Mafia. Entrepreneurs consider pizzo payments an inevitable passive budget item, as mandatory as rent or salaries. International operations, a global response to a global threat. The Ndrangheta has long ceased to be an Italian problem. Its ramifications have reached all continents, and fighting it is possible only through concerted efforts. Operation Eureka, in May 2023, became the largest international operation against the Calabrian Mafia. 132 people arrested across 10 countries, involving 2,770 police officers, seizing millions of euros in assets and revealing connections with 40 countries. But it is just a drop in the ocean. In Germany, in 2023, a separate large-scale operation against the Ndrangheta was conducted with Europol's participation. In Canada, Operation Syndicate in 2019 led to the arrest of 15 people and the confiscation of $35 million in assets. In Australia, Operation Ironside apprehended 383 defendants. Each of these operations is a success. But the Ndrangheta knows how to recover. The problem is that national legal systems are not synchronized. What is a crime in Italy may be legal in another country. Offshore zones offer refuge for criminal money. Corrupt officials in various countries protect Mafia interests. Even when a major boss is arrested, his place is quickly taken by someone else. Pope Francis and excommunication. When the Church declares war. In 2014, Pope Francis, during a visit to Calabria, performed an unprecedented gesture. He publicly excommunicated all members of the Ndrangheta. Those who in their lives follow the path of evil, as mafiosi do, have nothing to do with God. They are excommunicated from the Church. This was not a symbolic gesture, but a genuine canonical act. For an organization that had always entrenched itself behind religious symbolism, used the sanctuary of Our Lady of Polsi for its rituals, and considered Archangel Michael its patron, this was a blow to the very heart of its identity. The Ndrangheta built its legitimacy on a mixture of ancient traditions and Catholic symbols. The papal excommunication shattered this construct, but the actual effect proved limited. Many Ndrangheta members continue to consider themselves good Catholics. They interpret the Pope's words as politics, unrelated to their personal faith. The Sanctuary of Our Lady of Polsi continues to attract pilgrims, including not a few mafiosi. Local priests find themselves in a difficult position. Openly opposing the mafia means signing their own death warrant. The future of the Ndrangheta cracks in the foundations. The key question is, can the Ndrangheta survive the 21st century? It possesses three main advantages: blood ties, which minimize betrayal, a decentralized structure, resilient to arrests, and immense financial resources derived from controlling the European cocaine market. But cracks are appearing. Globalization dilutes blood ties. The younger generation, raised in Milan, London, or Toronto, does not feel the same connection to San Luca as their grandparents. Technologies make omertà less reliable. Intercepted messages lead to arrests. The growing number of pentiti demonstrates that absolute loyalty is no longer guaranteed. Moreover, the Ndrangheta faces new competition. Balkan groups have become active in the European drug market. Albanian clans challenge the Calabrian cocaine monopoly. Mexican cartels are trying to enter the European market directly, bypassing Italian intermediaries. The Ndrangheta still dominates, but its positions are no longer as solid as they were 10 years ago. Prosecutors warn, underestimation is deadly. Italian prosecutors constantly complain that their European colleagues underestimate the Ndrangheta's penetration into their countries. When we say that dozens of Ndrine operate in Germany or the Netherlands, they don't believe us. They think it's an Italian exaggeration, and then they find tons of cocaine in the port of Rotterdam. The problem is that the Ndrangheta does not behave like traditional mafia. There are no sensational murders, no demonstrative violence, no godfathers in expensive suits. They work silently through legal companies, through corrupt officials, through complex financial schemes. They are impossible to see until one specifically starts looking. And time works for them. The longer European countries fail to recognize the extent of the problem, the deeper the Ndrangheta embeds itself in their economy and politics. Today, it can be stopped. Tomorrow will be harder. The day after tomorrow, impossible. The story of the Ndrangheta, from 19th century mountain brigands to a 21st century transnational corporation, is a tale of how adaptation and evolution triumph over force. But it is also a story of the weakness of states that for decades ignored the problem until it became intractable. In this concluding section, we will summarize and seek to answer the central question: is there a chance to defeat the Ndrangheta, or is this war already lost? Calabria. When crime becomes culture. To understand the Ndrangheta, it is not enough to study court cases and money laundering schemes. One must understand Calabria, a region where the mafia not only controls the economy, but determines the very fabric of daily life. An American diplomat in a dispatch from 2008 wrote a phrase that became proverbial: "If Calabria were not a region of Italy, it would be a criminal state." This is not an exaggeration, it is a diagnosis. In Calabria, every economic activity, every transfer of money is under the control or observation of the Ndrangheta. Olive pickers pay 5% of their wages to the local clan. Construction workers hand over 5 to 10 euros per day. land cannot be cultivated without permission. Entrepreneurs consider payments to the mafia an inevitable passive budget item, as natural as rent or taxes. Leaving the region might require clan authorization. The climate of Omerta prevents any form of protest. Most people believe that nothing will ever change. These are not paranoid fears, it is reality, confirmed by dozens of trials. When someone decides to resist, the mafia is not subtle. They leave dead puppies, dolphins, or severed goat heads on doorsteps. They smash shop windows with hammers. They set cars on fire. The most stubborn are beaten, kidnapped, or killed. The message is crystal clear. Resistance is futile. Underground empire. Tunnels and bunkers. In 2013, police discovered a sprawling network of underground tunnels and bunkers beneath San Luca, a veritable underground city. Here were living quarters with televisions and air conditioning, weapons depots, secret laboratories for repackaging drugs, and rooms for performing rituals. Some bosses hid in these bunkers for years, never surfacing. Food, information, orders, everything was delivered through trusted individuals. These underground passages are not merely hiding places. They are a symbol of how deeply the Ndrangheta has rooted itself in the Calabrian earth, literally and metaphorically. The organization has grown in the rocks of the Aspromonte with the same tenacity as the roots of thousand-year-old olive trees. To uproot it would mean destroying the landscape itself. Younger generation, a choice between blood and freedom. Giuseppe was born in San Luca. His father is a local boss, his grandfather a legend of the organization, having participated in the wars of the 70s. From an early age, the boy was prepared for a criminal career. He was taught the code of Omerta, told stories of his illustrious ancestors, and shown how his family was respected. At 16 years old, he underwent the first initiation ceremony. The small saint's image with Archangel Michael, a drop of blood, the sacred words, "A bullet for you." But Giuseppe, a fictitious name, did what was unthinkable for his family. At 22 years old, he fled Calabria and turned himself in to the authorities. He became a pentito. His testimonies led to the arrest of 20 clan members, including his father. He now lives under witness protection somewhere in northern Italy, with a new name and a new biography. His family declared him dead. For them, he ceased to exist. Those like Giuseppe are becoming more numerous. The younger generation, raised in the era of the internet and globalization, increasingly asks, why? Why live in constant fear? Why kill and die for clan honor? Why remain in poor Calabria when the whole world is open? For their grandparents, the answer was obvious. Because we are Ndrangheta, because it has always been this way, because blood is more important than everything. For the new generation, these answers no longer suffice. But leaving the organization is not a simple job change. It is a betrayal of everything that defined your life. It is the loss of family, friends, identity. It is living in constant fear, because the Ndrangheta never forgets and never forgives. Yet the number of pentiti grows. This is the most encouraging statistic in the war against the mafia. Civil resistance, when society says no. In 1991, in the small town of Locri, a group of entrepreneurs created the association Ammazzateci Tutti, Kill Us All, a challenge to the mafia, a refusal to pay pizzo. Their leader was killed 3 months later. The organization disbanded. 20 years later, similar movements reappeared, but with greater support. The Libra Association unites thousands of citizens who demand the confiscation of mafia assets and their reallocation to social projects. On land seized from the Ndrangheta, cooperatives now operate, producing olive oil and wine labeled free from mafia. This is not just a business, it is a symbolic victory. But resistance is dangerous. Activists receive threats, their cars are set on fire, children are intimidated in schools, many give up, but some continue. If we don't fight, our children will inherit a world where the mafia is the norm, says Maria, a teacher from Reggio Calabria, who refused to pay pizzo and won a case against the extortionists. Economic paradox, how the mafia kills what feeds. Researchers have identified a strange paradox. In the short term, companies seized by the Ndrangheta show strong revenue growth, up to 24%. This happens because criminal proceeds are legalized through them. But in the long term, these same companies show catastrophic results. Debts increase, equity decreases, productivity declines. After a few years, most of these companies either fail or transform into empty shells. The mafia kills the economy of the region that feeds it. It is a suicidal strategy. But the Ndrangheta has learned to compensate for local losses with global expansion. When Calabria impoverishes, the organization earns in Milan, London, Toronto. When Italian authorities intensify pressure, business shifts to Germany and the Netherlands. It is not a parasite on the body of a single region. It is a multinational corporation with a diversified portfolio. Technological adaptation, old code in a new world. The Ndrangheta long resisted digitalization. Old bosses did not trust technologies, preferring personal meetings and handwritten notes. But the younger generation understood. In the 21st century, one cannot survive without technology. The organization began hiring IT specialists, creating its own protected communication systems and adopting cryptocurrencies. When police breached Sky ECC and EncroChat, arresting hundreds of users, the Ndrangheta was already testing its own blockchain-based solutions. When banks tightened control over suspicious transactions, the organization shifted to decentralized finance. When borders closed due to the pandemic, drug trafficking moved to drones and underwater drones. But technology is a double-edged sword. Every digital message leaves a trace. Every crypto transaction is recorded on the blockchain. Specialized police units have learned to read these traces. The war has shifted to cyberspace, and it is not yet clear who will win. Balkan threat. Competition for the European market. For the first time in decades, the Ndrangheta's monopoly on the European cocaine market has been threatened. Albanian, Serbian, and Montenegrin groups have become active, establishing their own supply channels from South America. They are more aggressive, younger, less bound by traditions. They are ready for open violence, where the Ndrangheta prefers corruption and diplomacy. Several sensational murders in Amsterdam and Antwerp are the result of this confrontation. For now, the Ndrangheta maintains control of 60 to 70% of European cocaine. Figures have dropped from the previous 80%. But the trend is worrying. The organization is forced to negotiate with Balkan competitors or fight. History shows external wars are more dangerous for the Ndrangheta than pressure from authorities. Cost of war. How much does the fight against the Ndrangheta cost? The Italian state spends billions of euros annually fighting organized crime. Specialized prosecutors' offices, elite carabinieri units, witness protection programs, and the maintenance of thousands of imprisoned mafiosi in maximum security prisons. Nicola Gratteri and 24 other prosecutors live under permanent escort, each accompanied by 10 to 15 carabinieri 24 hours a day. Protecting these individuals alone costs tens of millions per year. Asset confiscation brings some compensation. From 1992 to 2007, 5.2 billion euros in assets were seized from Italian criminal organizations. But this is a drop in the ocean compared to the Ndrangheta's annual turnover of $60 billion. For every euro confiscated, the organization earns 10 new ones. But the true price is not money. It is the lives lost, murdered judges, prosecutors, police officers, journalists. It is the shattered fates of pentiti, living in isolation under new names. It is generations of children raised in an atmosphere of fear and violence. It is the economic stagnation of an entire region. It is the corrosion of trust in state institutions. A glimpse into the future. 3 scenarios. Scenario 1. Gradual degradation, increasing pressure from authorities, a growing number of pentiti, competition with Balkan groups, and the weakening of blood ties due to globalization all slowly erode the organization's strength. In 20 to 30 years, the Ndrangheta will become a shadow of its former empire, controlling only isolated enclaves in Calabria. Scenario 2. Transformation. The organization fully legalizes itself, transforming into a network of respectable holdings and financial groups. The criminal component diminishes, blood rituals become folklore, omerta, corporate ethics. The Ndrangheta does not die. It dissolves into the legal economy, becoming indistinguishable from normal business elites. Scenario 3. A new flowering. Global chaos, wars, migration crises, economic upheavals creates new opportunities. The Ndrangheta exploits the weakness of states to strengthen its positions. It becomes even more decentralized, more digital, and more global. In 20 years, it will control not only drug trafficking, but entire sectors of the world economy. Which scenario will unfold? It depends on the choices made by three parties. States must choose between a decisive war on all fronts or an imitation of a struggle. Society must choose between resistance and accepting the mafia as an inevitable evil. The young generation of the Ndrangheta itself must choose between loyalty to the blood code and the temptations of the free world. For now, all three parties hesitate, and in this uncertainty lies the Ndrangheta's main strength. It has learned to prosper in gray areas, where the law is uncertain, morality is blurred, and the future is hazy. While the world doubts, the mafia acts, and with each passing day of delay, it becomes stronger, more invisible, more invulnerable. The story of the Ndrangheta, from 19th century mountain brigands to a 21st century transnational corporation, is a story of how adaptation and evolution triumph over force. But it is also a story of how the persistence and steadfastness of a few people, prosecutors like Nicola Gratteri, pentiti like Maria Conchetta Cacciola, activists like the members of Libera, can stand against an empire. Victory is not inevitable, but it is possible. And as long as someone fights, hope lives. Because the true battle is not fought in courtrooms or on the streets of Calabria. It is fought in the minds of everyone who must choose to accept the mafia as an inevitability, or to refuse to live in a world where blood and fear rule instead of law and justice. This choice will determine not only the fate of the Ndrangheta, but the fate of all of us. In May 2023, Europe awoke to headlines about the largest operation against the Ndrangheta in years. Germany, Belgium, France, Italy, Portugal, and Spain struck simultaneously. 138 people arrested, assets worth tens of millions of euros confiscated. The operation had been prepared for 4 years in strict secrecy. Investigators had studied encrypted conversations on EncroChat and Sky ECC, which the Ndrangheta actively used during the COVID-19 pandemic when personal meetings became impossible. In November 2023, Italy concluded the largest mafia trial in 3 decades. The Rinascita Scott trial, which began in January 2021, delivered sentences for 207 convicted individuals to a total of 2,200 years of imprisonment. Among them were local bosses, accountants, politicians, and entrepreneurs. Prosecutor Nicola Gratteri, under escort since 1989, called it a historic success. But even he admitted, for every convicted person, there are dozens of new members of the organization. In December 2024, new raids against the Ndrangheta occurred in several regions of Italy. Dozens of suspects were arrested, but the operations no longer garnered the same attention as before. Society had grown accustomed to an endless war where victories alternated with defeats and no end was in sight. In February 2025, a massive raid was conducted against Cosa Nostra in Sicily. Over 180 people were arrested. This served as a reminder that the Ndrangheta is not Italy's only mafia, but it is the Calabrian organization that remains the richest, most global, and most elusive. In May 2025, police conducted another operation against the Ndrangheta, detaining almost 100 suspects. The circle closes, the war continues, and no one believes it will ever end. Colombian Trail. When geography becomes destiny. While Europe celebrated arrests in South America, the Ndrangheta strengthened its positions. Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador. Here, at the sources of cocaine, the fate of the European drug market is decided. The arrest in Colombia of the Spaniard Hermenegildo Ventura Casana in 2014 demonstrated the Ndrangheta uses non-Italian intermediaries to mask its presence. Ventura was the liaison between the Calabrian Mafia and the Colombian Envigado cartel, securing routes through Panama and Costa Rica to Europe. Barcelona has become the city where representatives of Colombian cartels and European mafias meet. Here, hundreds of kilograms of cargo, routes through West Africa, and financial money laundering schemes are discussed. Spanish investigators intercept negotiations but only arrest the couriers. The main players remain in the shadows. The Ndrangheta's presence in Latin America is so profound that some experts speak of a reverse colonization. It is not Italians going to America, but South American cartels integrating into Calabrian structures. The Mexican Los Zetas cartel, the Colombian Envigado, the Brazilian Primera Capital Commando, all work with the Ndrangheta not as clients, but as partners. Paradox of strength: why police successes do not weaken the organization. Over the past 5 years, hundreds of Ndrangheta members have been arrested, assets worth billions of euros confiscated, and dozens of money laundering schemes exposed. Yet the organization does not weaken. In fact, according to some estimates, it has grown even stronger. How is this possible? The answer lies in its structure. The Ndrangheta is built on the principle of a biological organism. Amputated parts regenerate, adapting to new conditions. A local boss is arrested. His brother or son takes his place. A route through Spain is closed. A new one opens through Portugal. Assets in Germany are confiscated. Investments shift to the Netherlands. Encrypted messengers are breached. The organization moves to its own blockchain-based communication systems. Every blow from law enforcement makes the Ndrangheta more cautious, more decentralized, and more technological. It is an evolution under selective pressure, and as long as the state acts reactively, responding to already known schemes, the mafia acts proactively, inventing new ones. The figure that explains everything. 3.5% of GDP. The Ndrangheta's annual turnover is 53 billion euros. This is equivalent to 3.5% of Italy's GDP. Imagine, every 28th euro earned in the country is linked to the mafia, directly or indirectly. It is not a peripheral problem. It is a systemic parasite integrated into the very fabric of the economy. But it's not just about money. It's about the power that money buys. Politicians, judges, police, businessmen, thousands of people whose loyalty has been bought or intimidated. An administrative machine that operates not according to law, but according to clan interests. A social environment where the mafia is not an exception, but the norm. Changing all this is impossible with arrests alone. It requires a restructuring of the entire society, an economy that offers an alternative to crime, an education that fosters citizens, not subjects, a culture that values law above laws of honor. But such a transformation takes decades, and the Ndrangheta does not wait. Women and youth, where the fault line lies. If there is hope for victory over the Ndrangheta, it is linked to two groups, women and young people. The increase in the number of female pentiti from 10% to 28% in 5 years is not a statistical fluctuation. It is a sign of a deep identity crisis within the organization. Women who have upheld omertà their entire lives are suddenly beginning to speak. Why? Because they are tired. Tired of the violence, the fear, the life in the shadows. Tired of burying husbands, sons, brothers. Tired of seeing their children involved in an endless cycle of blood and revenge. For men, the code of honor is an identity. For women, it is often just a prison. And when the prison becomes unbearable, they choose freedom, even if the price is the loss of everything. The young, that's another story. The generation raised with the internet and globalization sees a world far wider than the Calabrian mountains. They know life can be different. They see how their peers in Milan, London, New York build careers without killing or stealing. And they increasingly ask the question that was unthinkable for their grandparents. And why? But the temptation is great. The mafia offers what no state can provide: immediate respect, easy money, a sense of power and belonging. For a young person from a poor Calabrian village, where unemployment stands at 40%, the choice between a job at €800 per month, if they are lucky enough to find one, and a business that brings in 5,000 is not a moral dilemma. It is a matter of survival. State versus the Santa. Who wins the marathon? If we consider the fight against the Ndrangheta as a war, the state is losing. But it is not a war. It is a marathon. And in a marathon, it is not speed that counts, but endurance. The question is not whether the Ndrangheta can be defeated tomorrow. The question is whether in 50 years in Calabria there will be a normal economy, functioning institutions, a society where law means more than blood ties. Over the past 30 years, the state has achieved successes. Asset confiscation has become a real tool. International cooperation works. Witness protection programs have saved the lives of hundreds of pentiti. Specialized prosecutors' offices have accumulated experience and expertise. The younger generation of police officers and prosecutors has grown up in this war. They know the enemy from within. But the Ndrangheta also evolves. It becomes more legal, more digital, and more global. In 20 years, it might not disappear but dissolve into the legal economy, becoming indistinguishable from normal corporations. Is this a defeat or a victory? It depends on how one defines the goal. If the goal is to destroy the organization, it is a failure. If the goal is to transform a criminal empire into a legal enterprise, it is a success, albeit debatable, but a success. Lesson for the world. When ignorance becomes complicity. The story of the Ndrangheta is not just the story of Calabria. It is a warning to the entire world. Organized crime thrives where the state looks away, society remains silent, and elites turn a blind eye. Calabria was forgotten by Rome for decades, and into this power vacuum grew an empire that is now impossible to dismantle. Today, the same is happening in dozens of regions worldwide, poor and depressed territories where the state is present only on paper, where young people see no future, where crime is the only functioning social ladder. From such places, new Ndrangetas emerge, perhaps not with Italian names, perhaps without religious rituals, but with the same structure: blood ties, a code of silence, a mix of violence and entrepreneurship, an ability to adapt to any conditions. Fighting them only with force is useless. It's like treating cancer with aspirin. The symptoms temporarily subside, but the disease progresses. The real treatment requires eliminating the causes: poverty, unemployment, lack of prospects, and weak institutions. But this is long, expensive, and politically disadvantageous. It is much easier to stage sensational arrests and report victories, and then wonder why nothing changes. Conclusion: undefeated yet vulnerable. Can the Ndrangheta be defeated? If victory means complete destruction, no. The organization is too deeply rooted in the economy and society, adapts too well, and is too decentralized to be destroyed by a single or even a series of blows. It is not a snake with one head, it is a hydra with thousands of heads, each capable of regrowing. But victory is possible if defined differently, not destruction, but transformation. The transformation of a criminal empire into legal structures, the breaking of the link between new generations and ancient traditions, the creation of alternatives, economic, social, cultural, that render the mafia irrelevant. This is happening, slowly, painfully, with setbacks and defeats. But it is happening. Every pentito is a crack in the wall of omerta. Every convicted boss is a message that impunity is not absolute. Every entrepreneur who refuses to pay pizzo is an act of resistance. Every young Calabrian who chooses university instead of the clan is a victory over the code of blood. The Ndrangheta is invincible as a monolith, but it is vulnerable as an idea. And the battle is precisely for the minds and hearts of the new generation. If they choose freedom instead of valor, law instead of omerta, the future instead of the past, the mafia will gradually degenerate. It will not disappear entirely, but it will cease to be an alternative state. This will take not years, but decades, perhaps half a century. But there is no other way, because a war of force against an organization based on blood ties and centuries-old traditions is a war that cannot be won. But a war of ideas, values, and prospects, that war can be won. If one does not give up, if one does not look away, if one remembers that the price of defeat is not just the Mafia's control over Calabria, the price is the future of the rule of law in a world where borders are blurred and crime has become global.